Right, I'm calling this meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education to order. If we could begin by all rising to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, per our usual meeting structure, we will hear public comment. We have 3 people signed up. Mr. Malley, first.
Chester Street. Good evening, Honorable Lawrence Educational Alliance. As you have done an excellent job as we are getting close to the end of this academic year. We are thankful for the board oversight and contribution to advancement of Lawrence Public School. Lawrence Public School and our citizens say goodbye to the greatest leader, Honorable Frank McLaughlin, soon is going to retire. We are grateful to him forever. Lawrence Public School, with the impeccable leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, in the road to become the best public school in our nation. We are proud to have the best student-focused budget with autonomy that enable different school principals do their best. We are grateful to Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris for keeping our schools open in the biggest crisis of September 13. Citizens, have united petition to request resignation of Maura Haley, Massachusetts Attorney General, for doing nothing against Columbia Gas murder and destruction. As our new generation are ready to go to the best universities in pursue their higher education, the importance of collaboration between citizens and this board in creating the best educational system are important. As great John Dewey said, education is not only preparation for life, it's life itself. In this important election year, please support our hard-working custodial employees. They need raise and the best union. We are grateful to Lawrence, Massachusetts School Facility Management. We are united in support of our teachers and their union. Their election is for their leader, May 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malley. Melissa Melendez? Okay, thanks. Diane O'Leary? Okay. Any other people wishing to offer public testimony? Okay. At this time, I'll turn it over to the superintendent, who will, I think, have her team offer an overview. Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you. So tonight we're pleased to propose the FY20 budget, and I'll start by highlighting our budget process. So the budget process was quite complex and involved a few things, and I thought we'd highlight those tonight. It's first managing and forecasting the FY20 budget. We had collaboration with central office leaders and principals, and this is to ensure that the budget reflects school-based needs. We had a focus on district-wide priorities as approved by this board, and we were in constant and robust communication with the board. Part of the process also included reviews by school and department, so we met with each school and their teams and each department. This included a review of staffing, expenditures, academic and enrichment services, school calendar, and of course their each individual goals. An example of that includes us asking schools leaders and their teams on their staffing structures, on their ideas about the goals that would match the priorities of the district, and of course school calendar and specifics of their days to include professional development time. Each school submitted their proposals. The budget team reviewed it, made recommendations, and then allowed us to then put the budget together. Our school system has 2 funding sources. First, it's funded by the city, and this is recommended by the mayor and then approved by the city council. This part of the budget is referred to as our local appropriation. Next is state and federal grants. We receive quite a bit of grants, and this is through formula-based, based on our population. Now, most of these grants are passed through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the period is usually not quite aligned, but it is between July the 1st and July the 30th fiscal year. Lastly, we have state aid that is determined in 3 steps. We call this Chapter 70. The formula is defined and calculated by each community's foundation budget, which is the adequate funding level for each district based on specific grades, our demographics, and then our students. It then determines an equitable local contribution, or how much of the foundation budget should be the contribution by the city, which is in part town's property and based on the relative wealth of the community. And the remainder of this is called Chapter 70. So in our case, it's local contribution, state aid, net school spending, and this is the minimal amount of a district must spend to comply with the state law. The proposed budget is $195 million, which is 1.8% over, or about $3.4 million. This is a graph of the current school net spending in the past 5 years. So again, our Lawrence receives $197 million in Chapter State aid, which is 94%, just a little bit over 94% of the overall net school spending. And that means that the city's requirement is a little bit over $10 million for the fiscal year 20. So how do we fund the schools? As you all know, we are an autonomous district, and school-based autonomy allows school leaders and their teams to move funds from one account to another one, as long as is within their allocation. And that is what gives the budget the difference between schools to schools. Staffing, we provide them to cover the cost of salaries, contractual obligations, career ladders, and salary schedules. And then there's non-salary budgets that we provide level funding for as well. In this budget request, what is being funded is all current existing positions, and that includes enrichments, athletics, extended day. It's level funded for instructional and operational materials, and it's all cost related to health, dental, and other benefits. It also includes our budget priorities, which is student achievement, student services, and educational infrastructure. So that's the additional appropriation that we're requesting in this budget. Again, it's 1.8 over and or $3.4 million, which will fund an additional 46.5 FTEs. So the breakdown of that is as follows. Here it is for student achievement, 23.5 new FTEs. You'll see that the majority of those is for our English language learners. Next is student services. These are school-based with the exception of a board-certified behavior analyst that will be centrally located and deployed. And finally, educational infrastructure. So this is the summary of our proposed budget, and we are happy to take questions.
Great. So at this time, I just want to make a couple of notes and then open it for questions. So first, I just want to reiterate what the superintendent mentioned in this process. We have had 2 lengthy budget subcommittee hearings to review the budget. And there were 5 LAE members who served on the budget subcommittee, 4 of whom are present right now. So we have all asked a number of questions on the budget already. There may be some additional questions right now, but I do just want to note that for the record, because there also may not be a lot of questions. So with that said, I will open it for any questions on the presentation from any of the LAE members. Okay. So I know Mayor Rivera is on his. Yep, Ventura.
Sorry about that. It's a little slow on the gun. Just to sort of help understand this, so approximately, as you think about just in order to, like, most of the budget is personnel, obviously. So roughly, I mean, because it seems like an increase, obviously, from past years. However, like, there's a certain, almost a fixed cost of just maintaining the current level of personnel. Roughly, as you think about, like, personnel, like, what is that cost, just from year to year, to make sure we could just fund the existing level?
$5 million.
$5 million? Okay, so that's just to maintain the current level, just to accommodate sort of increases and things like that?
Level of staffing, which is over 2,100 employees. The current level of staffing is about 2,100 employees. To just move them up based on contractual obligations, based on steps, anniversary steps, and career ladder is a little bit over $3 million, and then the rest of it would be employee benefits.
Right. And just one more question. On slide 6, it says that, you know, the city of Lawrence receives $197 million, and to meet net school spending, it's another $10 million. So obviously, if you do that math, it seems like it's over $200 million, right? But what the school is asking is actually less. Could you just explain maybe briefly, like, why is it less? Like, what happens to the over $200 million, but, you know, ultimately what the school is asking for is, you know, I hope you understand the question.
So, I'm not understanding
Okay,
the
so
question.
if you, like, slide 6 talks about 197 that's coming in Chapter 78 funding
Yep.
to the city of Lawrence, but to meet net school spending, it would be an additional 10 million, so that puts it over, you know, 207 million. But what's the process from when we get to that number to what we actually arrive at in terms of the
So
school-based
you're talking about the
budget?
cherry sheet number? So that's all Lawrence residents. That's not just Lawrence Public Schools. That also includes charter and choice students. So if that's what you're looking at, the $10 million
Correct.
from the cherry sheet, that's in all Lawrence. So of that, probably only 6 of that comes to Lawrence Public Schools.
Yep.
Because you back that out.
And I guess I'm just trying to clarify, not, I guess for all of us here, that there are certain expenses that the city sort of charges to the schools for the course of just doing regular business. So
Right.
I think that's just helpful to know that includes things like charter tuition, but other things as well.
So right, so the 197 plus the 10 would bring us to about 208 million, but you have to back out charter and choice, and then you'd also back out any city qualifying costs. So the city gets credit for DPW work orders on school buildings, on the administration of the City Hall to do any payroll-related work for school employees. So there's an MOU between the city and school about qualifying costs. So you have to reduce that. So that's not money that's coming to the school district. So that also counts between charter and choice. It's almost $24 million.
And again, just to clarify, make sure I understand, the current superintendent's recommendation is, I'm going to say the qualifier, just or only 1.8% above the minimum net school spending requirement. That's correct? With all the positions?
That's correct.
All in? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm all set, because I think at the last meeting, the questions that were raised have been addressed here, and I understood the process, and I knew I was okay with the numbers that were presented, except for the few questions that we had pertaining to how the money was divvied up between staff, and some of the staff that were moved to serve 2 schools rather than 1. So that has been addressed for me, and I'm all set with the budget the way it's presented.
John?
Pat?
I'm fine with the proposal here, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to attend some of the meetings school-based meetings, because it gave us a clearer understanding how the schools participate in creating the budget and how supportive they are from central office. So I want to thank the superintendent for that opportunity.
So what I want to do here is to get a report from the chair of the Budget Subcommittee, who is en route. So we're going to be in a brief recess. I'm going to call this meeting back in session. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Rivera, who served as chair of the Budget Subcommittee for LAE, to report on the activities of the Budget Subcommittee, and will then accept any motions from the Budget Subcommittee following that report. Mayor Rivera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what we had this year, given all the changes and all the distractions and emergencies, was an effort to try to put together a budget under not normal circumstances. And I think that is, budgeting is hard under general circumstances, but I think under these circumstances, they were more difficult. As continues to happen is I think that what we found in going through every page and every line of the budget book was that the amount of actual need always exceeds the number, the actual resources we have, but that given the right resources, the superintendent has put together a budget to teach kids and support them and their families in this process. And so I think what we did in the couple of public hearings is go through every line. I think that was very important for us to do, understand what they're doing with every dollar. And at the end of the day, ask the tough questions about why are we moving people from one location to the other. It was a robust and thoughtful exercise, I feel, and maybe some of the members could interject if they like. And I think that it was thoughtful in the sense that it was, for the first time in a long time, in an open public setting, we were talking about school money in detail, and people got to ask hard questions, and we got really good answers. That's the good news. And so we went over revenues, an exercise I haven't been a part of since the school committee was, since before the, and I'm not saying before, just before receivership, but before even before the school committee that was on board before the receivership. There was a real conversation about money and how we spend it. We talked about revenue. We talked about expectations. We talked about schools that maybe that were moving things around and didn't make sense to the board members, but made a ton of sense to the superintendent and her staff and how they feel like supporting it. This is clearly just one of a couple more steps that we have to take. And as mayor, I get kind of 2 bites at this apple. From here, it goes to the budget book that we're putting together for the city. And from there, we go to the city council. So I think that's all I wanted to say about the process in itself and the report, and that the subcommittee sent it to this matter, to this public hearing with no recommendation. But yeah, that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay. At this time, I would accept a motion to poll the subcommittee for a favorable recommendation or a recommendation to pass the fiscal year 2020 budget and send that budget before the full LAE. So we would be polling the subcommittee on a motion to recommend to the LAE board the passage of the fiscal year 2020 budget.
So moved.
Could I get a second? All those in, actually, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on that, and this would be,
Mr. Chair, can we have just a couple of things of discussion?
yep.
So since it was a public hearing, the question is, was there, again, I'm not sure if we did this, folks, if anybody spoke on the matter before us. Sometimes, when we do the public hearings, before we vote on it, we give an opportunity for the public to discuss it aside from the 2-minute thing. That's what, but I'm not sure if anybody did.
We took public comment at the beginning, per the usual manner that we run the LAE meetings.
All right, great. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but there wasn't an opportunity given to the general public to speak on the budget issues.
I thought that the comment period at the beginning was the opportunity, but I'm happy to reopen it. If anyone would like to come up and ask any questions on the budget, now would be an opportune time.
And I would say that it didn't get, usually these meetings are kind of boring and people don't come, but I gotta tell you, the Eagle Tribune did a good job this time around, getting the word out on the hearing, so I thought it was widely known that we were having this tonight. I'm surprised we wouldn't have had more people. I'm not just saying that because Keith's in the audience.
So welcome any questions at this time on the budget. Okay, so we have a motion to poll the subcommittee on the floor and to poll the subcommittee on recommending passage of the fiscal year 2020 budget to the full LAE board. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll of, and I want to be clear on this, of the subcommittee at this time.
Mr. Chair, may I ask, is the recommendation would be to send the budget to the full board with a favorable recommendation, correct?
That's
Not
correct.
passing it on our end?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
I abstain.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, the polling of the subcommittee passes with 4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. At this time, the public hearing on the budget is closed. I want to say under our LAE meeting, I just want to make a couple of housekeeping notes. First housekeeping note is our last regularly scheduled LAE meeting, we had a proposal that was passed here relative to school operating plans. This was the meeting I was not present at. Not to my surprise, there were amendments offered. One of the amendments called for this board to formulate a procedure for the review of the school operating plans. Under extreme circumstances. At this time, that procedure is not in place. However, I have consulted with the Department of Education, and because no operating plans have come before the LAE at this time, we have been granted an extension to formulate said procedure. In the spirit of democracy, I'm not going to appoint the authors of the amendment to be responsible for formulating that procedure, but we will follow up in due course to see that through and make sure that we get those procedures in place. I just wanted to note that on the record. The second piece that I just wanted to cover in terms of housekeeping was we've now favorably recommended the budget out of the subcommittee before the full LAE board. The full LAE board will meet on April 30th at 6 p.m. here at North Common Education Complex to take up the full budget, and hopefully follow the recommendation of the subcommittee. Are there any closing comments, questions, or anything that any of the LAE members wish to make at this time? Superintendent?
And I appreciate the hard work and the thoughtful questions that you all asked during the process.
Great. At this time, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we are adjourned. We will reconvene on April 30th to take up the budget.